if you're in your early days of growing your software company, sometimes it can be hard to see that vision, that future all the way down the road to whatever the end point is, whether it's an exit or even an IPO, going public. But if you know the path, maybe it makes it a bit easier. So I brought Chris Hicken on. He's at ClickUp and they're doing amazing things. But Chris has a wonderful journey where he started multiple companies. He's had a couple of exits. He's now sold to ClickUp, and really, he's got the path of how to go from 0 to 100 million and beyond so that you can follow the same path. He lays down some amazing tactics and strategies that you can follow. So definitely check this out if you're wanting to grow quick.
Welcome to Scale Your SaaS, the podcast that gives you proven techniques and formulas for boosting your revenue and achieving your dream exit. Brought to you by a guy who's done just that multiple times. Here's your host, Matt Wolach.
Hello, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us on Scale Your SaaS. This is Matt. I am your host, and our goal here is to help you understand how to do exactly that, how to scale your SaaS. So if you're new here, definitely subscribe to the show. We're going to teach you how to generate a whole bunch of great leads, how to make sure you close those leads, and how to build a team around you so that they can help grow the company for you. If you want any of those things and you're looking to grow your software company, we will be here for you, giving you all that information, putting the best people in SaaS in front of you, people who are creators, who are innovators, who are founders, who have done this before. And one of those amazing people is here with me today. I've got Chris Hicken with me. Chris, how you doing?
Good, Matt. Thanks for excited to be here. Thanks for having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise, I really appreciate you coming on. Let me make sure everybody knows who you are, Chris. So Chris, he's the Chief Productivity Officer at ClickUp, and I'm sure you've heard of ClickUp. It is the world's only all-in-one productivity platform that flexes to the way people want to work. It replaces all individual workplace productivity tools with a single unified platform that includes AI, project management, document collaboration, whiteboard, spreadsheets, and goals. You name it, they've got it. And this guy knows his stuff all around that. But he got there after building, scaling, and exiting UserTesting, which you've probably also heard of that. He learned a lot about how to grow and scale a startup to incredible heights, and I'm looking forward to hearing that journey. And Chris really is awesome with what he does. He's an advisor. He's an investor to several startups, so we are really lucky to have him. Chris, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So tell me what's been going on with you lately and what's coming up.
Well, very big picture, there's this enormous backlog, maybe even a historic backlog of IPOs that are ready to go when the markets start to improve. And we've seen a couple of them go out like Klaviyo to kind of test the waters and see how the market reacts. So at a high level, we're watching out for what the market is doing and making sure that the company's metrics are in a really great position for whenever the time is right and the company thinks it's a good time to take the company to the next level.
Yeah, that's very cool. What are you seeing with some of those metrics? Do you think it's going to be happening sometime soon? Like you said, some we're testing the waters, but you think that that's really, we're getting to the forefront of it?
Well, we're definitely not seeing the floodgates open up yet in terms of the IPOs going out. But certainly we know that investors, Wall Street investors, are looking still. Growth rate still is primarily the key metric that they're looking at, but also now efficiency has become a super important metric. So they're going to be looking at things like profitability, Rule of 40, CAC payback, the core metrics that help identify which businesses are efficient and which ones aren't.
I love that. And when you talk IPO, that's definitely something that a lot of people are wanting to do, especially if you're a founder of a software company. That's something that might be far in the future. For someone like you who really understands this industry really well, how can a founder decide, hey, the IPO is the right path, or maybe just building and scaling and reaping the profits, or maybe another type of exit? What do you feel like is, how does a founder decide between those options? We'll be right back. Hey, it's Matt. If you're anything like me, you check your website analytics and you see people coming to your site, but you have no idea who they are or what they're doing. Plus, why aren't they converting into leads? That's why I now use Leadfeeder. This thing is slick. Leadfeeder is a tool that shows me which companies are coming to my site, plus which pages they visited and in which order. So I can see their interest level just by what they're doing. You can use it too. You can track your site visitors' behavior and integrate the data from Leadfeeder with your CRM that helps make your lead generation efforts more targeted. The result, website traffic converts to sales. Click the link in the description and go to leadfeeder.com for a free demo and get a free extended premium trial when you let the rep know that you heard Leadfeeder through the Scale Your SaaS podcast. Finally know who's visiting your site with Leadfeeder. Do it. And we're back.
Yeah, that's actually an important question. For founders that aren't familiar with this, an IPO is really just another funding event, except that the funders are the public markets rather than investors. So first of all, it's important to know for founders that an IPO it is a funding event. You're going to give up a portion of ownership of your company in exchange for money that's being put onto the balance sheet. So that's number one. In terms of when the right time is to go public, a lot of it's going to have to do with the conversation with the board and investors and when the right time is to provide liquidity for those investors. So one of the factors that often comes into play is that investors are oftentimes investing out of specific funds, and those funds have a life cycle. So a typical VC fund, for example, lasts for about 10 years. So if an investor put in money about 10 years ago, they're going to be looking for a return for their investors. And so they might start to want to put some pressure on the company to provide some liquidity for them. An IPO is one way to do that. Now, there are actually a bunch of other really good options too that some companies have done. For example, rather than going public, a company can choose to pair up with a private equity fund, and that private equity fund will buy stock from existing investors or employees at a fixed price before the company goes IPO. And so that would be a way for a CEO or a founder to give liquidity to those investors without having to take the company public. Of course, when you take the company public, it does introduce a lot of new rules and regulations that you have to follow, quarterly reporting, SEC. So there's a lot of rigidity that you have to introduce into the company in order to go public. And so a lot of founders will delay that as long as they can.
Yeah, and exactly that. It's really public. So a lot of founders, especially in software, are used to being really private with what they're doing and with all their financials. And now all of a sudden it's out there. That's pretty crazy, right? It's quite a shift mentally, I bet.
Yeah, it's a shift mentally. And there's another thing too, which is you're accountable to so many more people once the company is public. And people are putting their own personal money into your business. So in some ways, you feel, as a CEO, you feel accountable to provide a return for individuals who believe in you and your company.
Yeah, that's got to be a pretty good feeling. But you're right. You would feel that obligation. There's Mary Johnson from Indiana who's got her savings in your company. And that's pretty cool. And also something you feel like you've got to deliver on.
100%. Yeah. And that's why a lot of CEOs, in some ways, and I'm going to do a little tangent here, and you can cut this out later if you want. But it's one of the reasons why CEOs, you hear the media will talk about shenanigans that companies do to boost up their stock price. Some of it is, of course, because their incentives are to drive up the stock price, but also there is a true sense of obligation that CEOs have to provide a return for people who trust them to invest in their company.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So tell us your story, UserTesting. I want to hear about this company. Where did the idea come from? How did that whole thing happen?
Yeah, so I wasn't one of the founders, but I'll show you. I came in really early, and I'll kind of talk about that story briefly. So at my first company, headsets.com, and by the way, this was back when it looked like online retail was going to be the future of the internet, right? So there was no SaaS. There was no Amazon had just gotten started, but Google hadn't launched yet. Google might have just launched. YouTube wasn't out yet. So there's very little SaaS available at the time. And so while I was there, one of our secret weapons was that we would do user testing on all of our marketing material. So we would, and we were sending out tens of millions of catalogs every year. We had a very popular website. And so we were able to see how people reacted to our marketing before it went live. So we never shipped any campaigns without user testing it. So when I approached the founders of UserTesting, I thought it was this huge company because we were doing all this testing, and I thought this thing must be huge. But it turned out it was 4 people in a small office in Mountain View, and the founders were just incredible. I mean, incredible product visionaries, Dave Garr and Daryl Benatar. And my pitch was like, look, I know how to use this as a marketer, and I know the value that I got. So can I come in and join you as the person who drives the go-to-market part of this business? And so I came on as the 5th employee, and we built the company from, about $500,000 in sales when I joined to just shy of 100 million when I left.
Wow.
And the company went public in 2021.
Very, very cool. Congratulations on that growth. That's fantastic. And having that journey is such an awesome experience in your background. What would you say were some of the biggest lessons that you learned going from that 500K to even getting to like a 10 million before you even got to the 100 million?
Yeah. Well, a lot of lessons. Probably the biggest mistake, which became our biggest lesson, was that we often selected executives to join the company based on their pedigree, meaning the logos of the companies that they used to work at. They were very impressive people, very smart. They were pre-vetted by companies that we liked and trusted. But when they came to user testing, they oftentimes weren't a fit, either because they brought a pre-existing playbook with them and they were not flexible enough to implement a new playbook based on the needs of user testing, or there was culture or personality clashes. But basically, we learned that in order to hire great executives into the company and help us scale, we had to vet for culture, and we had to vet for the ability to be a problem solver. And we actually started telling people that, look, we actually don't care that much about your experience coming in. We're not going to rely on that very much. What we are going to care about, though, is your ability to understand this business needs and solve problems in that context. So that was probably the number one. It's the hardest lesson that we learned. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I get it. It's definitely an expensive lesson to go through with having some people that weren't great fits and going through that process. I've learned the same lesson. And you do get, kind of blinded by the amazingness of the logos in their background. And you're like, oh, they've been here. They definitely must be incredible, hires for us. But you're right. Culture, hiring for culture is so important. It's something I've learned in my career. And beyond that, like you say, being a problem solver and finding those problem solvers is critical. How do you evaluate somebody before you meet them, if they're a problem solver or not? How did you guys do that?
Well, it's very hard to screen before you meet them. So
before you bring them in, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, a couple of ways. My favorite way is to actually do a project together. So as part of the interview process, you work on a specific project. So it could, if you're bringing someone into the product team, for example, well, let's actually scope out what an MVP would look like and how we would build this new feature. And just watch how they think through problem solving. What data do they want in order to make decisions? How do they collaborate? What types of questions do they ask? So that's one of the easiest, one of the best ways to screen for both problem solving and culture fit. Now, we don't blindside them. We do tell them what the company's core values are ahead of time. But having said that, people do have their natural working styles. So that emerges when you're actually in the middle of a project. It's hard to fake culture. It's hard to fake problem solving in that kind of a situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Once you've done a project with somebody or even kind of modeled it out, you start to really see what's underneath the hood and what's behind the curtain.
Yeah, and it's also important as part of that conversation, for example, to disagree with something that they're saying, just to see, are they defensive? How do they take feedback? Watch carefully how they treat their previous experience versus industry best practices versus customer data. So how do they use data in decision making? So all those wonderful things emerge as you do a project together.
So true. So true. I think that's something we can all take away is how can we get those problem solvers on our teams, especially in an early stage company. You need people who are able to kind of work outside of having a set regimented process that has been tested thousands and hundreds of thousands of times. You need people who need to kind of figure it out. And I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
Or even a set regimented role. Because a lot of times when you're early in, you got to wear a bunch of hats, and that's just the world of a startup.
So true. So true. Okay. So you guys did great there. Boom. 100 million IPO. How'd you get over to ClickUp? How'd that happen?
Yeah. So as we grew user testing, all of these huge productivity problems started to emerge. For example, it became really hard to see what everybody was working on. So transparency felt like it went to zero. Every team had their own workflows, their own data, their own tools. Collaboration really started to deteriorate, especially when it's cross-functional collaboration. Data silos, you probably hear about this, teams fighting over what I've got my data, marketing has their data of how many leads are coming in, sales has their data, no one agrees. So you start fighting about, things like data quality. So I felt like there just has to be a better way to run a company. And at the time, there were no really good kind of like overall project management tools. I mean, there were tools like Clarizen was out there and Asana, but they were really more for like professional services. So anyhow, I left to start a company called Nuffsaid. And Nuffsaid was a company that would allow you to do all of your work in one place, starting with chat, email, tasks, and calendar. So we combined all those into a single place. So for example, Matt, you could plug in all of your Gmail accounts, all of your Slack accounts. And I could say, okay, based on Matt's role, I know these are the 3 or 4 messages or notifications that actually matter to Matt right now. And then you could go create tasks and you can collaborate with other people in the company. You could schedule time to meet, et cetera.
Cool.
So really cool product. We raised a bunch of money from Google, General Catalyst, several other great firms. And then about 3 years in, we discovered ClickUp, which had an identical vision, but they were about 4 years ahead of us probably in product development. So long story short, we decided to sell Nuffsaid to ClickUp. And that was about 1.5 years ago. So that's how I came here. And ClickUp is carrying that same vision forward, which is if you can bring all of your work together into one place, and by all your work, I mean chat, projects and tasks, calendar, voice notes, what am I forgetting? Whiteboards. If you can put documents, if you put all that together in one place, then truly all the work is together in one place. It's visible and easily shared with everybody. And it incredibly improves the things that I talked about before: transparency, collaboration, data silos. All those problems are improved.
Yeah, no doubt. It's definitely something that's really, really helpful. And man, ClickUp's really been after it production-wise lately. You guys have been adding all kinds of stuff. So, how does that? I want to really understand. You have these couple exits. Now you come over and do something else. How are you separating? I mean, ClickUp's in a pretty crowded space. There's other productivity apps all over the place. Yeah. And yet ClickUp seems to be the one that people think of. How are you separating from all that competition? How do you differentiate?
Well, I think ClickUp started as a project management tool with a vision to eventually become kind of the everything app for work. So whereas other companies have aspired to be really great project management tools, ClickUp has aspired to be almost like, I mean, this might be of a stretch here, but almost like Microsoft Office version 2. It's like the evolution of all of your apps together into a single place. And because ClickUp has been built in this, I think one of the brilliance, this is the brilliance of Zeb, the CEO of ClickUp. He built ClickUp with incredible flexibility. And what I mean by that is you don't need an admin to customize your ClickUp. Anyone can go in and customize their workflow in exactly the way that suits them.
It's great.
They don't have to follow very strict company rules. You hear salespeople all the time complaining about Salesforce and it doesn't work for their process. Fine. ClickUp lets you customize it however you want. And on top of that, ClickUp, because work typically flows through a process, in sales, for example, you're going to go from lead to a contact to an account to an opportunity to a closed deal. And work like that happens almost across every department in the company. ClickUp's underlying data structure allows companies to build any app that they want within ClickUp. So for example, ClickUp is actually the #1 rated CRM on G2 over Salesforce and over HubSpot.
Wow.
Who would have thought?
I didn't know that.
But ClickUp is also an incredible ticket management tool for IT. ClickUp is I have to check, but I think it's number 1 or number 2 for marketing wikis. ClickUp is, always in the top 3 for project management. So because ClickUp is so well, actually, one more thing, ClickUp was rated by G2 the number 1 collaborative workflow tool.
Wow.
So because of that underlying flexibility, ClickUp can mold itself to the needs of the business so that literally all teams can run their work in one place. And I think that's truly what differentiates ClickUp from everybody else.
Yeah, that's super impressive and something that definitely would separate. One of the things I have, or one of the questions I have is if we get down to kind of a micro level and individual conversations, we have a lot of people building sales teams. I think about your sales team, and a lot of the market, I'm sure, still thinks of ClickUp as the productivity tool. So they're comparing you against other productivity tools. How do you educate the buyers and the market as a whole so that they realize, hey, you could do more than that? Because they might think they only have that one little problem. I just need productivity. How do you get them to realize that their problem is bigger?
Well, just like any other company, it's easier to start small and grow. So we actually don't need a CIO at a Fortune 100 to adopt ClickUp across the whole organization on day one. In fact, because ClickUp is a product-led growth company, it's actually way easier if maybe we would take on a smaller group, a work group of 25 people, 100 people, 250 people. And so ClickUp is really good at going into an individual group, solving their needs, and then using that success to expand into other teams and departments. And that's actually really the way that ClickUp grows most efficiently. And it's one of the secrets or one of the beauties of product-led growth is if you can make it really easy for a group or a department to get value on their own using the product, it makes it super easy for the sales team to go in and expand those accounts.
Yeah, no doubt. I can see how that would be the case. Okay, so this is really, really great stuff here, Chris. We're running out of time though. So What advice, based on your experience and what you've gone through, what advice would you share with new software founders who are starting out, they're growing their company? What would you share with them?
So this is July 2024. And most investors I've talked to in the last couple of months have said that this is a great time to be an investor. Now, that is not good news for founders, because what they're really saying is this is a great time for them to deploy capital because they can deploy less capital and get more ownership than ever. Mm-hmm. So for founders right now in this environment, it's ultra important to build companies that focus on being scrappy and efficient and minimizing cash burn. So one of the tools that founders can use early on, of course, is to lean much more heavily on AI. We haven't talked about that this much yet, but there's some very interesting things happening in AI right now, including the ability to build software, early versions of software from scratch using AI. And if you can get a strong technical person paired with a strong go-to-market person together, the two of them could build, there's, I think OpenAI likes to talk about $1 billion company with one employee. Well, that might not be realistic, but it could maybe be a small team of like 20 people using leveraging AI. So I think that would be the goal is, build a software company, but do it in a really scrappy way, minimize or eliminate salary expenses early on if you can, and lean in as much as you can into AI and automation to do work that you normally would hire people to do.
Yeah, brilliant. I echo that. I totally agree. I think that right now we're at just such a great moment in history to be able to get that right at the kind of ground level and just start really growing and scaling with AI. I think it's amazing. So awesome advice, Chris. This has been fantastic. How can our audience learn more about you and ClickUp?
Probably the easiest thing to do is just find me on LinkedIn. So search for Chris Hicken, Hicken. The easy way to remember my name is my first initial C plus my last name. Hicken spells chicken. I do have chicken@gmail.com.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a great email address.
I post on LinkedIn frequently. So if you want to follow tips and tricks on management or leadership, that's typically the topic I post on. So feel free to connect or follow there.
Okay, perfect. We'll put all that into the show notes. So if you're listening, go ahead and grab all that there and go follow Chris. He definitely posts some great stuff. Chris, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing all your wisdom.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you out there for being here as well. Hope you got a lot out of this. Again, make sure you're subscribed so that you can get more and more insights from other founders and leaders in the software world. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Scale Your SaaS. For more help on finding great leads and closing more deals, go to mattwolach.com.